Welcome to the Youth Sport Podcast. My name is Rihanna Poskin, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly within youth sport. It feels great when a kid comes up to you and says, "Coach, because of you, my life changed in the best way." It would feel awful to hear that because of you, the coach, a kid doesn't want to have anything to do with it ever again. I believe that kids deserve to have fun, to learn, to grow, to compete, and to play in a great environment. Join me as I interview guests that spill the tea on youth sport in order to help you make an enormous impact with kids right now. This episode of the Youth Sport Podcast is brought to you by Lululemon. I am part of the Lululemon Collective and will receive commissions when you shop through my link. Buying something for you or your loved ones, like my favorite warm down joggers, helps me to continue to bring interesting and empowering conversations for everyone. I have to tell you, when I'm coaching, I want to make sure that I'm dressed appropriately, I'm comfortable, my clothes stand up to all kinds of random situations, and that I have pockets. You never know who's going to ask you to hold something for them or what random things you need to carry with you. The Lululemon warm down joggers take care of all of my needs. I invite you to find your go-to item by browsing through the entire Lululemon site. You won't be disappointed. Please use the link provided in the video description below to start shopping. Welcome to another episode of the Youth Sport Podcast. I'm excited to welcome my guest today, Chris Hardill. Welcome, Chris. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
We don't know each other too well, so I'm excited to get to know more about you and then also to share your story with everyone else. Just to give some backstory, Chris grew up in Bridgenorth, Ontario, which is a beautiful little town with this awesome lake. And when you go through it, it just seems like the perfect summer spot. So we'll talk a little bit about that. As a young child, he played hockey, baseball, golf, basketball, downhill skied, and water skied. But his true passion was hockey. And he had the privilege to play in the Ontario Hockey League as a goalie for the Ottawa 67s, the Kingston Frontenacs, and the Barrie Colts. He then went on to assist the London Knights with goalie scouting, and last season did some color commenting for a few OHL Peterborough Petes games on TV. And so everybody must be super bummed out because the OHL hasn't come back yet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough right now. I mean, I know a lot of the kids that are playing in the league are having a tough time. They really want to get going, but with this crazy pandemic going on, it's hard to know what to do. I know a lot of them are anxious to get playing, and for mental health as well, it would be great. But it's got to be tough for them watching the NHL players playing right now. And for some of these kids, the OHL's it may be the pinnacle of their career, and it really is a great time in their life. So I really feel for some of those young lads that can't play right now, and I'm hoping they get some sort of season going here before too long.
Yeah, I keep on looking at the different blocks of people. So I was actually just at the arena today. We've been lucky that we've been able to open up a little bit now. And I was talking to a grandmother who is retired, and she was saying that obviously travel is one of the things that she loves to do. And so for her generation to be like, you wait all this time to finally get this chance of your life to be able to do all these things. And then the pandemic comes. And then you've got these young people who work their butts off and they've got these goals and their ambitions. And then finally they have their chance, and then the pandemic hits. And so it's crazy, for everybody.
It really is. I look back to when I was 16 turning 17 and I was drafted to the league, and I mean it's a ways back in the rearview mirror now, but it was the time of my life. It was a lot of fun, and putting myself in their shoes now, it would be really difficult. I'd have a hard time thinking these are months going by that I should be playing, and it's precious time too, right, for some of these young players. I mean, in their development over the course of a year, some guys may decline, but a lot of guys too can elevate their games and catch the attention of scouts, right? So it's tough. I look at a guy like Shane Wright, who was a 15-year-old playing for the Kingston Frontenacs last year and had an incredible season, led their team in points, and unfortunately right now he's not playing, and he's waiting for potentially having an OHL season. But for a guy like that, it'd be amazing to see what he could do as a 16-year-old, knowing the skill level that he possesses. And next year will be his draft year, and there was a lot of talk about him being comparable in a way to Connor McDavid or John Tavares, and I mean those are pretty incredible players to be compared to, but nonetheless, Wright's a great player, and it's got to be tough for him and his family right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a really interesting take on being a young person and moving away from home. And we're going to get to that because I would love for people to understand what that's like. As a parent, I couldn't imagine, you have only these few years with your kids in your household, and to cut them even shorter has got to be heart wrenching. So we're going to talk about that. But first, can you just tell me a little bit about your youth sport journey? You played all kinds of things. You were into water stuff as well. I also water ski. I love it. And, like in Canada, we only have such a small window of time to be able to do it. And so when you can, you got to hit the water. But then you also downhill ski and did all kinds of other sports. So you must have had a blast growing up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sports were always my love and they still are. I mean, I'm not playing as many now being 37 years of age, but nonetheless, I'm watching Sports Center every night and watching the Leafs and the NHL highlights, Major League Baseball highlights, and of course, following football, basketball, whatever's on. But I think sports are great. You know, as a kid, you learn so many things that you can take with you later in life. And hockey was definitely my passion, but baseball was right up there as well, and golf even. So like you said, the water sports. I mean, that's something right now that I got my kids doing. They're out. My last year, my 6-year-old was out water skiing, so I was pretty proud of her. And I'm sure my 4-year-old, seeing his big sister do it last year, he's going to want to do it this year. So I just think there's so many positive things with sports, right? Confidence and teamwork, and a lot of great attributes you can get from playing sports. So I was fortunate growing up in Bridgenorth. My parents gave me every opportunity to play different sports, and being a goaltender in hockey, of course, comes with a cost. But never once did I hear my parents complain about you know the cost of the sport or the cost of the equipment. It was what I wanted to do. I love the goalie pads. I love the masks, and even my friends to this day, they still laugh and poke fun at me because I can pretty well name if they show me an image of a goalie mask, I can probably tell you, who it belongs to, and or even just pads. So it was the passion I had. It was goaltending. I breathed it. I sweated it. It was awesome. And to this day, I still love my goalies and love checking out who has the newest masks and different designs.
Did you see the World Junior masks? They were representing the women's team on their helmets this year.
I did. Oh, I did. Devin Levi, I know, was the goalie with the World Junior team there, and they're always good. I know they do a lot of different things for the World Juniors, where they let fans design the masks, and it's really a fun thing. I know when I played with the Ottawa 67s, I got to go home and spend a night at my billets designing my mask, and there was lots of different options I thought of, and you're like a kid at Christmas thinking, what am I going to go with, what style? And I was fortunate enough to know Ron Tugnett in the Peterborough area, and he always had some cool masks when he played for the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Senators, and the Oilers, etc. And as a 67, I decided to go with the little splash that he had on his mask, and it was pretty neat. I can remember that being, I was 19 years of age, but sitting there like I was 6 or 7 years old, all excited to get the equipment matching with the 67's jersey, which is a legendary jersey in the Canadian Hockey League. So it was a lot of fun doing that. And again, checking out the goalie equipment is still something at 37 years of age that I thoroughly enjoy.
Yeah, well, it brings out the creative side as well. And I don't know, I think sport can be really creative just in the flow of the game. You have to adapt to how the other team's playing, how you might be feeling on that day. So the whole thing is a very creative thing. And then to throw in some art in there is a pretty cool thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. In sports, you got to adapt, to sort of several different things, and yeah, it's great. Like I said, kids can learn so many things through sports, and it helps them build character as they're growing up. And I mean, you're going to come across some tough moments in your career, and then you'll have some real highs and again the lows. But I can remember playing major junior hockey and having some highs, and had a game where I stopped 61 shots and felt pretty good. We got outshot 61-23, and somehow we lost 5-4 in overtime. So it was one of those incredible games where I, was thrilled with my performance. Wasn't thrilled about obviously just getting 1 point at that time, but and a loss. But it was, you have those highs and again the lows where, maybe as a goalie you give up 5 or 6 and you're feeling kind of guilty. But I had great parents that supported me all along on my path to the OHL, and my dad would say you got to forget about it and kind of move on to the next game and put that one behind you, because if you sit there dwelling on it, it can really wreak havoc. So put it in the past, move on to the next one, get out. I was always excited for the next practice to get out and work that just a little bit harder and find my game, right, to be ready for the next one.
Are you the kind of player that remembers stats all over the place? Because you just rambled that off pretty quick off the top of your head. Can you remember a lot of
Yeah,
things from playing?
yeah, absolutely. I can. stats are something that I've just been able to retain my whole life, right? So
Yeah.
it's funny, you know, like I said, growing up and getting that opportunity to play in the Ontario Hockey League was amazing. And there are a lot of pressures. You know, a lot of people forget that these are just kids playing, and you know, a lot of people give them some heat sometimes, and then you forget. You know, you see a goalie pull his mask off, and you look at him and go, "Geez, that's just a 17-year-old boy, right?" Or 18-year-old young lad. So.
Yeah.
You know, people forget that, but there's lots of pressures. I mean, you look at some of these rinks, you go down to the Budweiser Gardens down to London, and they're getting, I think, 6 or 7,000 a night when, you know, pre-COVID. And back in Ottawa, I know in 0203, the 67s led the league in attendance, and it was, you know, 9,800, I think, fans a game was the average. And oftentimes there was 10,000 plus. And that was a rink where the Senators used to play when they first came back into the NHL in the early 90s. So, you know, I look back now and I think, holy jumpins, that's crazy playing in front of that many people. And told myself just to trust my ability. I was there for a reason. And, you know, my reflexes would take over, and don't overthink it, right? You start overthinking things, and that's when you get into trouble. So, you know, you have that little pregame prep talk with yourself and say, just trust your ability and give it everything, and see where things fall. But again, these guys have lots of pressure. I can't deny that.
Yeah, when you said about them just being kids and pulling the mask up, I have this vivid memory of being in an arena and having it was a high school game that was going on before my son's practice. And I was bringing him into the dressing room. And all of a sudden, there was just like this massive goalie walking past me. And of course, because you get a couple inches with the skates, and then
Yeah.
you get a couple width added onto you, and then it was just like, oh my god, it throws
Oh,
you
for
off.
sure.
It's just massive, right? But then, like exactly what you said, you see these guys leaving with all of their equipment, and they're just little kids again. So it's like that intimidation factor just with the equipment on is wild.
For sure. And I remember going into my first training camp when I was drafted by Barrie Colts, and I was 16, and my birthday was coming up in about 10 days into training camp. And some of these players were 19, 20 years old, right? And they had the full beards. And I'm thinking, man, look at these men that I'm all of a sudden playing against after playing, you know, midget AAA the year before, right? So I'm out there thinking, geez, these guys are old. And then all of a sudden, I was one of those guys. We were in the playoffs in Ottawa. I had the playoff beard, and, you know, 19 years of age. And all of a sudden I was one of those guys going, geez, did that ever go by quick? So I
Yeah.
always tell the guys I know that have kids playing, or the kids I know that are playing in the league, enjoy it and savor it, because it really does go by fast. And one of the interesting things I find is, you know, you talk to these guys that I have some friends that have played in the NHL and have just recently retired or still going. And they'll even say to this day, some of their best memories were playing junior hockey, whether it was in the Western Hockey League, the OHL, or Quebec League. The friendships they formed back then were incredible, and they still have friends from those times, right? So it goes by quick, and you got to think everybody's kind of at the same level at that time. I mean, you have guys that are higher draft picks, and, you know, guys that are up and down from tier 2 or whatever the case may be. But everybody's billeted. They're, you know, making the small amount of money that they are at the time, and whatnot. So you're all kind of equal, and it's, you know, you're young teenagers, right? So it's a lot of fun for those guys at that level.
Yeah. What's your favorite memory before hockey got serious in sport? Do you have one?
Um, in, in all honesty, I think it would probably be, I mean, this winter, my wife and I have enjoyed our time with our kids, just being out on the outdoor rinks, and even going out to the Lakefield skating oval, which is nice and close to Peterborough. So I think my fondest memories, honestly, were just being out on the outdoor rink, going out there and with a couple buddies, or even by myself, and I just go out for a skate. And I wouldn't really work on my goaltending, but I'd go stick handle pucks and take slap shots and shoot on the net. And it was just that unstructured play, right? That there was nobody there. Not that I had any coaches that were, you know, constantly barking at you or anything, but, you know, just to go out and play, and not have any pressure, and, you know, 3-on-3 with your buddies, or 2-on-2, or, you know, line up some pucks and play goal, and have somebody take 10 or 15 shots, see how many they can score. No pressure. My parents were nice enough. They built me a rink in Bridgenorth when I was a kid, an awesome rink in the backyard. And we were fortunate, actually. Mike Fisher was one of our neighbors. So Mike would come over the odd time, and everybody in Peterborough knows Mike quite well. So he was one of
I
those
think
guys that
everyone
everybody.
around North America now knows who Mike Fisher is.
Absolutely. Mike had a wonderful career. I mean, he was a great player, and an underrated player too. He put up a lot of points, and his longevity was incredible. Played for, I think, 18, 19 years. So, you know, put up points, was tough, a tough guy to play against. So it was pretty cool having him as a little guy, you know, come over to the rink and skate. And I was always still am a diehard Toronto Maple Leafs fan. And my mom had painted the logo that used to be at Maple Leaf Gardens at center ice, right? So
Awesome.
there I am out there pretending I'm, Felix Potvin or Curtis Joseph or whatever the case may be. But those are some of my fondest memories. And I was fortunate, like I said before, I grew up with parents that supported me the whole way, never ever once pressured me into playing or into playing goal. That was totally on me. I said, I want to play net. I want to have the cool equipment. I want to look good. And they supported me all the way. And I remember my dad even saying to me, when things weren't going well, I'd never pressure you to play. You don't have to play. I think you're good at it. And that's why I enjoy watching you, but there's never any pressure. So having that was, everything to me and to a lot of players, right? You knew if you didn't play well, you didn't need somebody to tell you how bad you were. These guys are smart enough. They know, geez, I wasn't on tonight. But yeah, I go to my dad for some support, and he was like a goalie coach to me. He knew when things were going well and when they weren't, and he could provide some tips. So having that support system was, and a sister and a mother, having everybody support me so much was incredible. And it's important. You're a young kid, you need that support.
Yeah. Did you have the same support from coaches too? Do you have any memories of a time when maybe a coach did something or said something to you that really stood out for you?
Yeah, one of my favorite coaches, probably, I have two, I think. Brian Drum, he coached the Petes back in the 90s, and he was really good to me. He let me play in Cobourg with the Cobourg Cougars for a few years and develop my game. And Drummy, as they call him, was instrumental in my development and gave me an opportunity to play. And was just a good guy. He was a straight shooter, and if there was problems, he'd let you know. But I like to think I was pretty easygoing. I still am. Just went out, worked hard, and prided myself on that. Right. I always think if you can work hard, there's players. I remember Zenon Konopka, for instance, with the Ottawa 67s. I actually played against him with the Kingston Frontenacs, and he was a guy that played in the NHL for a long time, and he did so because he was tough. He was willing to block shots and work harder than a lot of people. So there was guys that were definitely as talented as him, and that's no disrespect meant to him whatsoever. But just that work ethic took him to the National Hockey League and gave him, probably 400 or 500 games or whatever he played. So hard work can go so far. And I was going to touch on the other coach I really, really liked was Brian Kilray. He's a legend. Everybody knows who he is in the Canadian Hockey League. And he was good to me. And, he'd tell you, I remember him after a game one time in Oshawa, I didn't play so well. And he said, could have driven a semi through your legs last night or something. He made his point and skated on, but he was always there for you too. He was a real gentleman, and, opposing fans would see him yelling and screaming from the bench and may not know what to think of him, but he was a caring guy, and he was there for support, and he got the best out of you. So really respect that man, and he helped me develop into an adult later on down the road. So.
Nice. Now, a goalie in any sport is a pretty risky position to be in. And then I see in hockey, just because the speed of the game adds on that little bit of extra risk for you, everybody coming in super hard. And then the pucks are, it's a frozen piece of
rubber.
Rubber. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. So a frozen piece of rubber that's shot as hard as you possibly can at you. And the smaller it is, I'm sure the harder it hurts, or the more it hurts. So what is that like?
And I was lucky enough in my summers to skate with Mike Fisher and Mark Savard and some of these local guys in the Peterborough area. And it was amazing the speed of the shots and their ability to get shots off quick, even that much quicker than the OHL guys. And again, just that much older and that much more experience, right? But my thing was, I always thought goaltending was fairly safe for the most part. You have to worry about, you're growing the odd time or if somebody lands on you, but for the most part, you're geared up pretty well. You got a good mask on and chest protector and pads and everything. And I always thought it was a little bit more dangerous for the players, right? They might be racing back for a puck and somebody either trips them up, it could be inadvertent, accidentally takes their skate out and they're 5-6 feet from the boards and go crashing in. And if you're going head first, that to me is a lot more dangerous than a guy winding up and blasting a slap shot at you that you might take in the chest, right? So,
okay.
I think there's obviously, there's chances of getting injured in any position, but for the most part, I was able to get through my hockey career without many significant injuries. And I went traded for anything. If I had gone through a couple serious ones, I probably would have kept plugging away anyways. So
Yeah, and then also for the parent perspective, it's always hard to be the parent of the goalie because like what you said earlier already is that you feel like you could have blocked another shot or, it's always you feel I don't think that the whole team would blame you, but that's kind of how I see it that a lot of goalies take it on very personally. So how are your parents being the parent of the goalie?
They were excellent. Like I said, they're for just fully supporting me. But it's funny now that we talk about it, a long time after. I mean, it's, geez, 18 years ago or something now that I had a junior career. So now looking back, my mom said, every time you came off the ice, I was thankful that you weren't hurt and that you were okay. And
Yeah.
she said it was also extremely difficult going to these games. And I never knew it at the time, right? Because they were so good giving me that support and never let on that they were nervous.
Yeah.
Because that probably would have it would have been a good thing for me either. But looking back now, my mom says it was really hard. Again, you go into some of these rinks, and when I was with the Kingston Frontenacs, we'd be playing the Ottawa 67s, and Ottawa was always a great team. And I was fortunate; I always played them really well, and that's probably what led to me having a chance to play with them later in my junior career. But she said it was really tough. You're in there with 10,000 other fans, and pretty pretty comparable or pretty close to an NHL atmosphere in that rink back at that time. So she said it was pretty nerve wracking. Every shot there's oohs and ahs in the crowd and just
Yeah.
covering her eyes thinking, please don't go in. So it's a little different when you're a goalie. I think as a defenseman, if you make a mistake, you lose a puck from somebody, you can get back and maybe strip the puck off them again, or a forward, can back check hard and make up for your mistake. But as a goalie, if you let that puck in, it can be unforgiving at times, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about your journey into junior hockey and what was your preparation like? Did you always know that you had this goal that you wanted to go as professional as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. As a youngster, it was always my baseball and my hockey were the top sports, and I did well with ball and always had a good arm, sort of thing. So I didn't know if it would be ball or hockey that I would chase, but I started getting into my teenage years and it started growing, and then all of a sudden had some scouts, talking to me, and I was fortunate enough to get drafted in 2000. There was 20 rounds in the draft, and I went 11th, so kind of middle of the pack. But I knew that, hey, you know what, somebody was interested, and now it's my opportunity to try to make an impression. And I went to Barrie and didn't necessarily, I got into a few games as a young 17-year-old, and I think I played 4 games pretty well, and then my fifth wasn't so great. I actually was in Ottawa, believe it or not, and I started off by skating out in Ottawa. They have a tunnel where you come out onto the ice, and I can remember a guy was all focused, and this worker there said, "Just watch for the carpet at center ice." So didn't think much of it. So the lights are off, the cheerleaders are there. It's quite an atmosphere. It was really incredible at that time, and skated out. And sure enough, all of a sudden I look up and there's a carpet, and I tried to jump over it and thought, well, it'll look like a hot shot if I make it over the carpet, like I'm something big. And
Yeah.
if I don't, I'm going to look like a fool. Well, it's funny to talk about now, but at the time it wasn't great. But sure enough, I jumped, didn't quite make it, and did a little face plant. So that was tough. With all of a sudden, please rise for O Canada. I'm taking my mask off, going, geez, I look like a fool. But again, builds character. It's not the end of the world. Things happen, and
Yeah.
that game wasn't so good. But I always played Ottawa well, and later on got to play for that team, which was again incredible. And just to touch on them, I mean, when I say it was an NHL atmosphere, we in the playoffs got to fly to several games. So we went to the fourth round, lost to the Kitchener Rangers, who had Mike Richards, Derek Roy, David Clarkson. I mean, the list goes on of guys that had long NHL careers. And I remember we go to the Ottawa airport and then fly to Kitchener for a couple games, and even St. Mike's in the third round, right? So you're going to these airports, you're not even packing up your equipment. You're going there, jumping on the plane, going to play the game, come back from Kitchener, get home at a good time. Really, really NHL like. So for a guy that didn't go on and play, minor professional hockey or anything, that was kind of the NHL point of my career, or the glimpse into what that life's like. So it was
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
Awesome. Well, if you want anybody to empathize with your falling, I have a story of falling on my face as well. I took piano when I was young and I made it through a few different rounds of competition to this last final thing.
Right.
And so this is where everybody comes and listens to everybody play. It's not just like a one-off thing here and there. And there was the side of the stage that had a curtain that was over it. And so no one
Right.
could see me fall, but you could definitely hear me fall. And it was just
Oh,
like,
no doubt.
and then
Yeah.
obviously coming out on stage, I'm beat red and I'm not even thinking about the music that I'm about to play. And then you're trying to compose yourself and like regroup, and then all of a sudden all of those emotions are going through you. So I totally understand. I did not fall in front of 10,000 people, but it felt like 10,000 people. And so I totally know what you're what you're saying.
For sure. And I mean, it was one game. And like I said, the funny or ironic story is that I ended up finishing my OHL career with the 67s and
Yeah.
playing in front of some of those 10,000 fans, right? So some of them may not even remember it, but now at 37 years of age, I'm not afraid to admit that it happened. It's not a big deal. Mistakes happen, it's just a kind of a freak thing, and so be it, right? It helps you build character, I guess, right? So
Exactly.
I
So
was 17 and
if any kid is listening, life goes on. It's all good.
absolutely. That's a little minor. I wouldn't even call it a speed bump, not a big deal. So
Yeah.
not a big deal at all.
Okay, so I would love to know about the billet side of things. So, like I said, there's so many people that want the opportunity to play sport and it's their dream. And in order to do so, they have to travel, and the travel can happen young. So tell me all about it. If people don't know, tell us what a billet family is.
Yeah, so Bill family is basically a family that takes you into their home. The OHL team will provide them money, obviously for food and electricity and whatnot, right, that you're using. But nonetheless, I mean, these families a lot of times don't get paid a ton of money, and it's out of the generosity of their hearts. They're good people that want to take in a player. So I was fortunate to have some pretty good billets throughout my junior career. I still stay in touch with a lady I lived with in Kingston named Cheryl, and then Dawn that I lived with in Ottawa as well. So both really, really good quality people that were generous and made sure I was comfortable living away from home. And again, we still have a relationship now that Don just sent me a text the other day and said to Google his young granddaughter, who's an incredible figure skater. And I thought at first, I wonder how well she's doing or how good she is. And I believed him, of course, but I Googled her name, and nonetheless, I think she's about 13 years old, and she's all over YouTube and Google, and they're talking about the Olympics for her and figure skating. So
Wow.
really, really impressive. And it's neat to have that relationship still, right? So I
Yeah.
was just a young lad at 17, 18, 19, and here I am at 37. And he wants to hear all about my family, right? So I'm sending pictures of the kids and showing him the activities they're doing. And it's pretty neat. It really is.
Yeah. And your sister, you mentioned that you have a sister. So did she miss you when you were away?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we stayed in touch all the time. I think I talked to my parents almost every day,
Yeah.
probably every day, really. And my sister, she was off to university. She was at Western for a bit, and then Trent and Queens and whatnot. So we've always had a great relationship, and she was a good support system for me as well. And likewise, I mean, both ways, sort of thing. So she was never too much into the sports like me, but it's also nice at the same time. I always think it's important for some of these young kids growing up to have relationships with people outside of sports too. So I had lots of friends that had never touched a hockey stick, and then of course I have friends that's all they did. So it was nice to leave the rink sometimes and go and socialize with some other friends that didn't play, right? And you can
Yeah.
talk about other things, and it's important to keep those friends around throughout your life and your career as well.
And were there any kids in the houses that you lived with?
You know what? No, there wasn't with Cheryl and Kingston, and then the Billet family, Don in Ottawa. His kids had moved on and moved away from home, and there was actually another player that I played with. Carter Trevisani was a defenseman who played, and he was 20 years old when I was 19. He's a great guy. He's got kids around the same age as my kids, so we've actually talked about hooking up once COVID hopefully comes to a conclusion,
Yeah.
hooking up with his kids and maybe taking a vacation somewhere. So it's really neat to have those relationships still, and he's still a great guy. So
Yeah.
it's amazing the friendships that you can form when you're young and then carry them on into your adult life. And I still think I'm living the dream now, having a young family. And as much as my hockey career was incredible as a youngster, it's pretty surreal now to have a couple little kids and I watch them go out on their journey into the sports world and academic world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Whitby, and so the Oshawa Generals was our closest OHL team. And I knew people that went to the high school where most of the guys would go to if they were brought into town.
Yep.
And I would say that sometimes there were mixed reactions with
Yeah.
what was happening. So tell me a little bit about your experience. Were guys taking advantage of the academic side because they were hockey players?
Um, I mean, it's funny, right? Hockey players, some people, have that perception, right? And I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair to, paint everybody with the same brush, right? Like I said, I had friends that weren't into hockey at all. And when I was in school, I remember going to Algonquin College and I met a couple friends there. And, it was a few weeks in that they said, where are you living? What are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm, playing hockey with the 67s. And one of them didn't believe it, right? They said, you don't seem like a hockey player. There's no way. And then sure enough, I proved it to them, right? But I mean, there's anywhere in life, you're going to have people that are, I don't want to say big on themselves, but you have people that are courteous and soft spoken and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, you're going to in hockey in a room, you're going to get different personalities. And I was always raised to, try to be a gentleman and treat people with respect and treat them how you wanted to be treated. So for me, that's the way I was at the rink, and that's the way I was when I was away from the rink and in school and stuff. So my experiences with school and whatnot are great. I still have a buddy from Kingston actually that I keep in touch with to this day, and he was a swimmer and never really played any hockey, had never had any interest in it,
Okay.
but nonetheless we connected, and he was into a different sport. So there was nothing wrong with that, and it was nice again to have that separation as well.
Yeah. Is there a background check that goes into the families? There must be.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in Peterborough with the Pete's, Walter D. Clemente, who was with the police before, I believe he's involved in that process. And of course, they want to make sure that it's a safe environment. And I'm assuming there's police checks and whatnot done. But yeah, they definitely want to make sure they're putting these kids into safe homes. That's of the utmost concern for sure. And making sure that it's quality individuals that want to take these players in. So basically, I mean, they want to have the room available for the player and a desk and whatnot, and a quiet area that they can, have their peace and quiet as well. So definitely there'd be checks that would go into place, and they want to make sure that the right people are opening up their homes.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm curious about the rules of the home as well, because it must be awkward a little bit because you're not actually the player's parent, but you still want to make sure that they're conducting themselves properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it was, and I hope it doesn't sound cocky because I don't intend on it sounding that way, but for me, it was easy. I was raised with, again, good morals and ethics and being good to people. So when I went into these homes, I was a shy, 17-year-old, and then I had to kind of grow up quick and also speak up as well, right? And it was good for me to get away from home at a young age and kind of come out of my bubble a little bit. So there was definitely rules within the house, but they were pretty simple rules. If you're not going to be home for dinner, could you please let us know and
Yeah.
give a heads up so that we don't cook this great big meal and then, in Ottawa, the two of us don't show up. Well, I mean, just have some common courtesy and let your billets know that, we're going out as a team for dinner, or we're doing a movie night or whatever, right? It was pretty simple. It was just having respect for those people, right? They're being good to you. And I mean, it was also good for me because I was pretty spoiled growing up, and I was able to, do some things that maybe I wasn't doing at home, right? They weren't going to do my laundry. They weren't going to do other things. Maybe you have to shovel the driveway to help out and do some of those things. So, I mean, if you're living there and they're being good to you, you got to pick up a shovel and help clean the kitchen or whatever, right? Just be a good human being.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what is the schedule like? Because you're in school still, yet your demand in the sport is quite high. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, it's tough. And I always look back to Ottawa. I always mention Ottawa just because it was my favorite year for sports and
Yeah.
having that chance with the 67s. But it wasn't too bad. I was taking courses in sports broadcasting at Algonquin College. So I didn't have too many courses, but looking back, I probably could have even taken a couple more, to tell you the truth. I think staying busy is a good thing. Sometimes people start overthinking things when they have too much time on their hands. So for me, staying busy was good. I lived in Orleans when I was billeted, and Algonquin, of course, was over in geez, it was a while back. I think it's in Nepean. So I'd had a bit of a drive there to go to and from my billet's house. But no, it was good. It was something I enjoyed, right? I always knew that my dad always said, you have to have another plan if hockey doesn't work out. And I kind of knew I wasn't going to be one of those guys that went on to make millions of dollars, right? But even playing the OHL was an accomplishment. So looking back now, many years ago, I'm still proud of that. And staying involved in the league a little bit, doing a little bit of scouting with the Knights was great. And then last year with the Pete's, jumping into a couple broadcasts was amazing as well.
Yeah, it's a definitely interesting thing because for some the dream is to make the big bucks and to be able to, have all this fame around you. But I would say for most kids, I mean, obviously like 99% of us aren't going pro. And so just to have that sense of what it could feel like must be super cool. And so just even getting to that point, it must feel great.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like I said, I remember being on a plane there, and I used to be kind of afraid of flying, to tell you the truth. And Brian Bickle was actually a teammate in Ottawa. He's a good friend of mine, and everybody knows Brian because he won several Stanley Cups with the Chicago Blackhawks, and he's a great guy. But he was just a 16-year-old kid, an underage player at that time, and I was 19. And I remember him sitting beside me on the one flight, and he was kind of chirping me a little bit because I looked a little nervous and whatnot, right? But it was incredible. I mean, that team with Jeff Hunt as the owner and Brian Kilrea as the coach, it was they were the team at that time that everybody wanted to play for. And I remember guys from other teams saying, "Geez, I wish I had been in Ottawa '67." So I knew how fortunate I was. And I mean, I spent a lot of time on the bench. I was backing up a goalie named Lucas Menseter, who was a great goalie. But I was a good teammate. I worked hard in practice. I'd like to be one of the last guys off the ice and try to be one of the first guys on. And it's amazing that coaches appreciate that so much, right? That hard work and dedication. And I put up some decent numbers when I played. So looking back, again, no regrets.
Yeah. Now, hockey is an interesting game in itself because there has to be this side of you that's going to handle just what the game brings. It's a very physical game. It can be quite vicious, right? And so with you saying that you've got this timid and more calm personality, can you tell me how you responded to that environment, and then also maybe how coaches could have been very aggressive in the way that they coach, even though your personality doesn't reflect that?
Yeah. I kind of thought I was a little bit unique, maybe in a dressing room, because I was, again, soft spoken, and I wasn't going to be one of the macho guys, you know, speaking up and yelling and screaming and whatnot. But I think you need those guys too, right? It's good to have a different mix. And for me, I was comfortable with who I was and who I am today. And I think I threw the mask on and put my goalie gear on and went out there and just competed like anybody, right? So once you get on the ice, I think that was the thing for me. Once you're on the ice, you're just one of the guys or girls if you're playing in a girls sport. And for the guys at that level, you just want to compete and compete hard, right? So for me, it was easy. Just put the mask, the gear on, go out there and battle. But off the ice, it was you take off your stuff and then you try to be a good person, and again, try to meet as many people as you can. I mean, and the nice thing for me was looking back, some people drop the lines, "Oh, you're a suitcase," or whatever if you play on a few teams. Well, for me now, it's so nice looking back that I met so many people throughout my hockey career. I even had a chance when I was 20 to go down to Nova Scotia and play a few games as well, and later did a little schooling out in Calgary. So I've seen a lot of the country and met a lot of people, and I have so many connections now in the hockey world that it's pretty cool to actually say I played for a few different teams. And if an alumni event comes up, I have lots of options instead of just one. So it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of coaching, how would you say that you had the most brought out of you? What did a coach do in order to get you to where you needed to be?
Um, I think positive reinforcement's obviously a good thing. Again, you knew when you played well and when you didn't play well. If I had a bad game, I didn't need a coach to come in and yell and scream and tell me how bad I was. I mean, there were times where a coach had to make his point, and say, "Guys, the effort wasn't there tonight, and you guys are better than that," and whatnot. But I definitely didn't need somebody getting in my face and telling me, "Geez, I expect more." I knew what I had to do, and I was competing hard every night. I put my gear on. So you know what? And I think for young coaches too, I mean, if you're going to do the read the riot act every time and come in and kick the garbage can over and all that, that gets old too, right? That gets old in a hurry, and players lose the message as well, right? Oh, here we go again. Here you go and doing this thing, right? So, I had coaches that had your back, sort of thing, and were there to support you. And a guy like Brian Kilrea, I mean, there's a reason that he won 1,000+ games. I think it was like 1,194-ish in his career, and that's an impressive number. And it was from being a good human being and understanding what his players needed at different times, right? Again, the garbage can being kicked over all the time isn't going to do it. And Killer was a guy that he knew when to throw a dig out or a chirp, as the players like to say. And he definitely got the most out of his players during his career.
If you could offer any advice, if certain things are happening that maybe you're not agreeing with, how would you approach it in a way to give yourself a voice and to try and make change if necessary?
Well, it's funny actually. My career, and I said I played with a few teams: Barrie, Kingston, Ottawa, and actually I sometimes even forget. But as an overage player, I got traded to the Petes and went to camp. Had a really good camp. Was disappointed that they ended up there was 4 overage players in camp. They ended up going with three other guys, and I was disappointed because I thought I had competed really hard, played really well, and I mean, it is what it is now. And I look back now thinking it wasn't the end of the world. But at the time, I was pretty disappointed, pretty upset. But I went to my dad, right, and just said, Dad, you know what? I don't think this is. I guess I don't agree with it. You know, I'm disappointed, whatever. And he said, you know what? Be professional. Be a gentleman about things. It'll pay off for you in the long run, as opposed to going in there yelling, screaming, and voicing my displeasure and whatnot. So I think in the long run, it probably did pay off for me, not necessarily in the hockey world, but by being a good person and still being a gentleman and shaking hands with the coaching staff and management. You take the high road, right? You try to be classy. So a lot of the advice I got was through my dad, and he's been a successful businessman for a long time and always treated people well and with respect. So I was lucky I could lean on him and get that advice before, not that I was going to have an outburst, I don't mean that, but before jumping to conclusions.
Yeah, so you had a moment to think things through and then kind of see what the outcome could be had you made one choice over the other. And then I think it's really important to have someone that you can trust in order to have those conversations. So that's great that your dad was there for you.
Absolutely. Like I said, I consider myself one of the luckiest guys in the world because my parents and my sister were so supportive. And again, no pressure, right? It was never, geez, you played awful and you should be doing this and that and this and breaking it down. My dad went to games. He sat up in the crowd, stayed out of the limelight, so to speak. Sat up high, whatever. I didn't even see him there. You know, I did my thing, and then afterwards we'd go have a dinner and maybe talk hockey for a couple minutes, and then just talk life, right? So I think it's so nice when kids have that support system and they can, again, talk about things outside of hockey. You know, if you've played well, you know, if you've played poorly. I'd go to my dad if I wanted some pointers or some advice, but he wasn't just going to start berating me with the things that I should do and work on. So for me, hockey was fun. I enjoyed it. It's a great game, and there's so many positive things that come out of it. And again, I mean, if you overthink it, there's a lot of pressure, but just trust your ability, trust your instinct. And I always say to people, even if it's other sports that they're interested in, or if it's becoming a vet or becoming a scientist or whatever, find your passion and chase that dream and put everything towards it, right? I mean, do your schooling and still remember what's important in life and that there's way more to life than hockey and sports. But if you want to become a major league pitcher or shortstop or a football player, well, then chase it, work at it, and hopefully your parents will support you and try to help you go as far as you can.
Yeah. Did you have any problem leaving hockey as being wrapped up in your identity as being a hockey goalie for so long? Did you have trouble transitioning?
You know what? In all honesty, yeah, I'd say it is a little bit tough for me when I realized that the dream was going to kind of come to an end. Yeah, I mean, that is your identity. Everybody would kind of always, come home. You'd come home at Christmas and remember guys from high school. Oh, I heard you're playing with the Ottawa 67s and all this and that. I mean, sometimes you hadn't even talked to these guys before, but all of a sudden now they want to talk to you, right, about it. So yeah, you kind of get that identity, and it was tough, I guess, in a way, but at the same time, like I said, I came from such a nice family, a good family that gave me every opportunity to do things. So for me, once hockey was kind of done, I got back to downhill skiing and going out water skiing and going and playing squash. I even love playing squash to this day. And some of those things that kind of got taken away from me because hockey was that only priority for a bit. It was kind of nice to go back to those things. So I think it is important when you hear these NHL players and stuff. It's got to be a lot more difficult for them because they were playing a lot later into their adulthood than I was just playing junior hockey. But I think it is important for them to think about the future and what am I going to do after hockey, because there's still lots of opportunity out there.
Yeah, and you're very young when you finish for the most part because hockey, you can't play it forever. So you do have a good chunk of life left over to be able to do all kinds of other things.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for me, I was in my early 20s or whatever, and these guys are retiring. Now it's a young man's game, right? It's all about speed and skill and all that. And I look at guys like Jason Spezza, right, who's 37 playing with the Leafs now, and I admire him. I look at him and think, geez, it's got to be tough playing at that level at that age, right? And he's doing a great job putting up points for the Leafs. And I remember playing against him, and that was cool back in the day because he was such a high-end prospect. But there's a guy, I mean, I think he's got 4 daughters, and he'll retire in the next few years. He's had a wonderful career, but no doubt, I mean, if he wants to do something in hockey, he's going to get his opportunities, whether it's coaching or broadcasting. Another example is Anthony Stewart. I played with him in Kingston. I don't know if the name rings a bell or not, but he's on Hockey Central at noon all the time, and he's also doing Hockey Night in Canada. And so there's a guy who played some NHL games and now has parlayed it into a broadcasting career. So pretty neat. There's other opportunities. And then, for some of these guys, if they get outside of hockey, then so be it. There's way more to life than hockey and sports. And it's still my passion. And if I wasn't doing this interview, I'd be watching an NHL game tonight. So, but I'm glad to be here. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, there's so much more to life than sports as well, right? So chase your passion, enjoy it, and have fun with it. But at the same time, enjoy all the other things that life has to offer.
Is there anything that you missed out on that you think back as a kid because of hockey?
You know what? In all honesty, not really. Again, I enjoyed it so much. My parents knew that's what I wanted. I have no regrets. I mean, they gave me the opportunity to play, grow up, buying goalie equipment all the way through, experience the Ontario Hockey League. Honestly, no, if I was to sit here and say that there was something that I regret, I'd be lying, because my upbringing was incredible. And once summer came around, I still played hockey here and there, but I know nowadays people say they got to play 12 months of the year and be on the ice 5 times a week and this and that. I really do think it's still important to play some other sports. The one thing I was always happy about was I could play hockey well, or at least I thought well, some baseball very well. I'd go out and play football with buddies, or basketball, squash. Again, the list goes on. And again, not sounding cocky, but could pick up on any of those sports and actually play it fairly well, which was good. And I think that helped me out in my hockey career as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the hand-eye coordination that you need as a goalie, your reaction time, you have to have the strength. You have to, obviously, if people are playing year round, we're worried about overuse injuries. We're looking at burnout for these kids, all kinds of things. So I'm really happy that you took that perspective as well, that you were able to just enjoy sport and movement and then still find that focus in your hockey as well. I think that's awesome.
For sure. And I knew in hockey that, a month or two before the season, you had to really ramp it up and get out there and take lots of shots and get that game shape back, right? But it was so nice to, when I was 17, 18, 19, I wasn't playing baseball competitively or anything, but I was doing these other things like squash and whatnot. And it was so nice to play those other sports and turn the hockey off for a bit, because there is such, mental pressure as well, right? For these, just not the physical, but the mental, it's nice to aspect of the game. It's nice to shut that off for a little bit and have that time to regroup. I think if it is 12 months of the year and whatnot, I think it's parents, there's a fine line as well. I think, some parents get so wound up with it that, you see some kids by the time they're 14, 15, 16, all of a sudden lose interest in the sport because they've been pushed so hard for so long, right? So I think, one of my buddies who worked in the NHL for a little bit said it best, that, the guys that want to go to the rink 12 months of the year, that's great. If they don't, and you're pushing them there 12 months of the year, it's probably not going to work out in the long run, right? So some of those guys like a Mike Fisher and obviously numerous NHL players, they loved living at the rink and being there all the time. And that was their passion, right? That's what they wanted to do. But if somebody else sit there, dragging them all the time, got to be honest, I don't think it's going to work out in the long run.
Yeah, and I see it with kids too. So you've got kids that are quite young, and my kids are just a little bit older than yours. One is the same age, 6 years old. And I see the little ones where, everybody's grumpy. You
Yeah.
show up at the rink and, mom or dad is grumpy because you had some fight getting to the arena, and then your kid is grumpy because they don't want to go in, and then maybe they make it for 20 minutes and then they're just laying in the corner. And I see all these different scenarios, and I really wish that we could just recognize that it's like, you know what? 10-20 minutes is maybe okay. Let's just do that for now. And then next time when we come back, maybe we extend it just a little bit more, but let's keep it fun and keep them engaged in a way that, everybody's enjoying it, instead of having it be this pressure situation.
For sure. And I mean, for me, my 4-year-old son, he fortunately enough, he loves the hockey. He loves going, and I take him early in the morning, never complains, puts his gear on. It's amazing. And I'm really fortunate that he's like this. He puts his stuff on. We go to the rink. He'll skate for an hour, no problem. He skates really well now. He enjoys it. He's having fun with it. And I think for him, if we even added another night of skating in, he'd be fine with it. My daughter really has enjoyed the hockey as well. I'm really proud of her. She's doing really well with it. At the same time, people have said, you want to get her on the ice a few more times a week. And I've said at this point right now, she enjoys it for what it is, the 2 times a week, out there socializing with some friends, improving her skills and whatnot and having fun with it. So I'm quite proud of her that she's doing it 2 times a week. I didn't know if she'd even play. She wanted to do it because her little brother's doing it. I recognize as well that if I was to put her out 4 times a week, there's a good chance I'm actually probably going to push her out of it. Maybe I know she doesn't want to do it that often, so let's just leave it at 2 times a week. Let her enjoy it throughout the week. She can do her little art, soccer, whatever. She likes other sports as well. She water skis herself. So some of these other things, it's nice to have those different options. And I just know personally with her, you get to know your kids, you get to know people, how they react. I just know she probably would be a little bit more upset if she had to do it all the time and was being pushed to go to the rink. So let's leave it as it is right now. If down the road she wants to get real competitive with it and get serious, well, there comes a time that you got to do that, and we'll let her make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great perspective to have on it. We will wrap up in a little bit, but I would love to know two more things if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
One question is about scouting. So if anybody is going through the process that you went through, now you actually scouted kids as well. What are coaches looking for?
Yeah, so I was fortunate a few years ago to do some scouting. Rob Simpson was the general manager of the London Knights at the time. He's now the associate general manager. Basically, I just assisted, their head goaltending scout with observing some goalies in the Ontario region here. I mean, for me, first and foremost, I go to the rink and look at a kid. As a goalie, you want to see, how well he can move around the ice, and basically, you're looking at that skill level, right? Is he somebody that draws your interest? After that, once you think, on the ice, he looks good and everything, of course, teams want to find out about the player a little bit more and perhaps their background, their family, what the kid's like. They could go through the coaches of the team to say, tell us a little bit more about him and do their homework that way. But I mean, first and foremost, going to a rink, I think as a scout, a lot of times you're looking for those talented guys on the ice, and the game's so fast now that, you go to a rink. And I was fortunate back a few years ago. Some of the players that I saw were Alex Newhook, a guy that played on the World Junior team this year for Team Canada, who's a great player. Connor McMichael, another guy that ended up in London and played on the World Junior team. Jack Hughes, who's now with the New Jersey Devils. So I got to see some of these players, and immediately you recognize that they were skilled guys, and then you hear all the positive things about what kind of people they are too, right? So, I mean, yeah, you can see a guy sometimes that's a great player, and then you hear some nightmare stories, and you're going, oh, geez, do you want that headache, or do you want to take somebody else that's going to be less of a problem, right? But for
Yeah.
me now, it's neat looking back 4 years ago and seeing how those kids developed and the size that they gained and the strength and their skating. But it's such a fast, skilled game now that you're looking for people that can skate and obviously have a lot of talent as well.
Yeah. Do you guys look into social media at all? Like, do you do any quote unquote trolling to see what's going on as well?
Yeah, you know what? I would think so. To be honest with you, like I said, it was kind of a casual thing with me where I was helping Darren McChesney and Rob Simpson and these guys with London on a
Okay.
casual basis. So I think for the guys that were in, the head scouts and the general managers and stuff, I'm sure their homework would be a little bit more in depth and whatnot. But no doubt, I think a lot of these people now have these public profiles, right, with Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and can't keep up with everything.
Yeah.
But definitely, I mean, yeah, you want to, they want guys that are mature and are going to be good teammates and good members of the community, right? These guys come into these different towns and are expected to do some things, in public, and you want good role models for these young kids as well. So I think that's definitely something that would be looked at.
Okay, my last question is about the probability of making it as a goalie. Now, are we almost setting young kids up for failure if they want to be a goalie because there's only so many teams that you can play on?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really tough, obviously, but I think we're also setting them up for failure if we say, yeah, you know what, the chances are so slim to none, you're not going to make it. Don't even bother trying or whatnot, right? So for me, again, my family was so supportive. My friends were always so supportive. There were people, that I did run into back in the day that would say, yeah, the chances are so slim to none. Why even try, sort of thing, right? And I'm always a firm believer if you think you can or can't, you're right. I love that saying to this day.
Yep.
And I still even think of that, when you're playing squash and you're exhausted and you're fighting over that last point against a buddy. I'll even say that in my head. You know what? If you think you can or can't, you're right. Find that extra energy. Find a way to win, right? Find a way to beat your buddy. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think it'd be a bigger tragedy if we told somebody there's no way you're going to make a level or accomplish something than, looking at it and saying, why even bother, right? So I think it's slim to none, but you know what? I made the OHL. I'm proud of it, and I have some buddies that have played in the NHL and have been fortunate to do that. And if they had to listen to some people that said back in the day it wasn't worth doing it, then they never would have made it, obviously. So
Yep.
you can do some crazy things if you put your mind to it and give it your all.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. So if you could offer in closing one piece of advice to coaches out there, could you offer anything from your experience and from what you've been thinking about over the years? What would you offer?
You know what? Again, I mentioned it earlier in the interview, but I think just that time for some unstructured play, even, and I know some teams that'll get to the rink and give the kids, 10, 15 minutes to kind of do whatever they want out there and set up different games. And I mean, for me in junior, I remember playing rebound in Ottawa all the time at the end of practices, and it was basically, you had a shooter in front of you 15 feet out, and then a bunch of guys lined up beside you as well, and they're trying to jam away at the puck and get the rebound in. And I was, it was unstructured and it was free play at the junior level. But again, we were all competitive. I didn't want them to score on me, and they were trying to put pucks past me, right? So I think just, that kind of stuff and that positive reinforcement. And I mean, there's times where you got to speak up and get the most out of your players and maybe do a little, raise your voice a little bit. But for the most part, I mean, most guys know when they haven't played well, they know they got to come back the next day and put in that extra effort, right? So, just keep a positive, as much of a positive atmosphere as you can in your room or around your team.
Awesome. That's so great. Well, I really appreciate the time that you've taken with me. And hopefully there's still a game on that you can go and catch to finish off the night. So if anybody wants to find out when these episodes come out, you can always go to my website, which is rihannaposkin.com. I'm so thankful that, Chris, you've taken time with me. And I think you've left some really good key advice. I love your stories. So thanks so much for being with me today.
No, really enjoyed it. And it was a lot of fun. That's for sure.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll sign off for now. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.